So I will kick off my camera here so my mug is not a distraction. And without further ado, let's just get into tonight's meeting. Um, here's a quick outline of what we're going to be looking at tonight. We're going to run through the first things pretty quick, but I just want to keep some things in everybody's mind. First being our scope and purpose. I want to talk a little bit how we can have discussions and be sharing info outside of these meetings, making sure that we're all staying in contact throughout the year, not just during these meetings. Some other places for you to get some information. I want to give everybody a preview of coming events and how our year is shaping up. Then Chris Clicks is going to be giving us a status update on our SGC Towplanes, letting everybody know how that's looking for this coming year and its operations. And then our main presentation will be Hunting the Wild Thermal by Mr. Mike Bamberg. So first things first, really quick, the scope and purpose of the SGC. It is a lot more than provide tows at a freighter. And this is something we said back at the January meeting, and I just want to keep this fresh in everybody's mind. The SGC was founded as a regional council to organize and unify soaring activities across the northwestern U.S. And we're really trying to re-emphasize that part of our mission this year and into the future. And that means coordinating with other clubs more. It means sharing information, helping push mentorship and safety and education. And that is going to need participation and support for everybody. And so thank you to all of you who are helping carry out that mission. And to those of you who are part of multiple clubs, please make sure that your clubs know that we have resources to offer them and help and partnerships we want to build with the other organizations around the Northwest. For those of you that want a bit of more story and texture and background, this origin and basis document on the SGC website is really good. Again, we've mentioned it in the past, but I just wanted to show it up again for those of you that haven't seen it. If you go to the SGC website, seattleglidercouncil.org, and look on the main information page, just click that word information. There is this document that says on the origin and basis of the Seattle Glider Council. It's a great read, and it's a really interesting insight into how this whole organization came about and what it's been up to over its long history. All right, the next thing to talk about is discussions and sharing information. I'm going to be sending some of this information out in an email in the next couple of days to everybody, but because our email system basically only goes to current and past SGC members, I want to make everybody, again, including people from other clubs and other organizations, aware of this additional resource. Many of you may know it, but some people do not. We have a Google group. It's called SGC_news. Although the title says news in the name there, it is an open discussion area. It's a resource for all pilots in the Northwest to have an open dialogue. Often the conversations revolve around a freighter, but they don't have to. This, again, can be a resource for pilots to talk about upcoming events, no matter where they are, coordination and cooperation between clubs, safety and educational information, cool stuff you saw at the SSA convention, noteworthy ADs or safety concerns, all that sort of stuff. Please feel free to use this resource. It's been an active discussion forum in the past. It's kind of petered out during the COVID times, and we'd like to see it come back alive a bit. Again, because using this Google group means that people of multiple clubs and multiple organizations can all participate. You don't have to be a member to see this or participate in this. In fact, if you go to that website that I've got listed there, you don't even have to sign up. You can just, I've set it up so you can just immediately read the conversations and see what's going on there. Try to make this really simple. If you want to post messages, you do have to sign up, and we just do that to make sure that, you know, spam bots and scammers don't get in and you know, muck things up for us. But the The conversations are available for anybody who signs up to participate in. And if you do sign up, you can also choose to get the messages delivered in email. So you don't even have to go to the website. You'll just see every message, or you'll get a daily or weekly digest of all the recent messages. And you can just read them in your inbox and then reply to the email to contribute to the discussion. And you never have to go to the website again if you just want to do it in email and keep it simple. So again, for those of you that may be hearing this the first time, I urge you to go to the Google Groups website, check out SGC_news, sign up, be part of the discussion. And for folks who are not part of the SGC, who are not current SGC members, I, on behalf of the SGC, am going to try to make sure that in the future, I am posting SGC general meeting invitations to that area, because these meetings are open to all pilots. And other important announcements and safety information will be posted there. Again, we'll continue to send out messages through our SGC tools for sending group emails to members, but we are also going to use this as a way to reach out and communicate with folks across organizations. So, any questions and concerns about that before I move on? Awesome.
I would just add that if anyone is involved with their club's website, to add a link to their website up for this.
Great idea, Chris. Thank you. So there's a couple other quick places to get information as the season approaches and people start thinking about operations and how to go flying and where to get information. I just wanted to remind people of two places that may be overlooked from time to time. The first one's the SGC website. Again, if you go to the SGC webpage, which I'm going to try to bring up now, and you click this information page here, you'll get a bunch of our club documents, bylaws, all kinds of stuff about the club itself. But if you just hover over the word information, you'll see we have a whole page about AFREDA operations and safety and screenshots and things of the airport layout. We've got parking maps. We've got information about contests. We've got webcams. So there's a whole lot of information and resources here for folks to use that could help you get prepared for coming out, for having an operation, for understanding what's going on in this area, and all kinds of other good stuff. So don't sleep on this information page in the SGC website.
Noah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I'm first time on the phone here. It turns out that the pictures, the last picture that was transmitted was 9 November. Somebody goes out there, they might want to go restart our picture group, because it belongs to us and not to the airport.
Yes, the official, I believe you're referring to the webcams. The official webcams are actually a joint venture between the Port of AFREDA and the Seattle Glider Council. And yeah, they're having some technical difficulties at the moment, but we are working to get them fixed soon. And they'll definitely be operational by the time the season starts.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. The other thing that people may not know about is that the SGC Soaring Foundation, sort of our affiliate organization, whose mission is definitely on the education and promotion of soaring safety side of things, has a YouTube channel. All of our SGC general meetings are posted there, our recordings are posted there. We also have videos there about flying cross country out of AFREDA, the proving grounds tasks for those that are interested in starting cross country and using AFREDA as a base of operations for that. We have presentations about contest launching, flight safety in the area that's intended to be shared with a power pilot audience that may not be aware of what gliders are and what they can be in terms of an airspace conflict issue, and other good information. So if you have not checked it out, I urge all of you to check out the SGC Soaring Foundation YouTube channel. Just search YouTube for SGC Soaring Foundation. You can use this URL, although over the last couple of years, YouTube has changed the way channels work and they keep renaming this. So if this URL doesn't work or you just want to keep it simple, all you do is go to YouTube, search for SGC Soaring Foundation, and you will find our videos. And again, just as a quick demonstration of that here, if you search for SGC Soaring Foundation, you'll see our Seattle Glider Council logo here. And on here, you'll see a whole bunch of different videos. There's playlists of all of our general membership meetings. There's a playlist that covers the various XC soaring topics. And this is an ever-growing library of videos and presentations that you all are welcome to check out.
Noel,
Yes, sir.
can you link that link under the foundation heading of the Seattle Glider Council?
That is an excellent idea. We will work to make that happen. I've just made a note and we will follow up on that. Thank you. All right, it appears my animation is broken on this page. I was going to reveal these slowly, but moving on to the next topic, unless there's any other questions about the YouTube. Great. Wanted to give everybody a quick look at what the AFREDA calendar is looking like for the SGC. Well, actually the general SGC calendar. I shouldn't call it the AFREDA calendar. This includes some other events. I'm just going to talk through these really quickly. You guys may be reading ahead, but the season's going to kick off the weekend of April 15th. That is when we're going to be having our official clubhouse opening. Stay tuned. We'll be talking about this again at the April general meeting, and you might see an email between now and then on this topic. We will want maybe a couple folks to come out there and help us open up the clubhouse and start getting it ready. Now, the good news is we have had Nan Clicks and Chris Clicks and a couple other folks, but especially those two, working on the clubhouse all throughout the winter, and there's more work that will be done. I want to thank publicly Nan Clicks for her efforts so far and the others as well. We are going to have a clubhouse that is the old clubhouse you know, but with a bit of a new spin on it. Nan has been working to make the main upstairs area much more functional for the way we all operate there now, much more comfortable, refresh some of the artwork, reorganize the kitchen, make the downstairs area more productive, and get rid of some of the musty items that contribute more to a dormitory feel as opposed to a training center that we can all use and be proud of. And I'm going to get scolded here, I know, by Mike Bamberg in just a minute because I used the term clubhouse on this and I shouldn't, because we do have a training center, not a clubhouse. So that will be fixed post haste. Let's see. I'm just going to keep running through these, go a little faster here. Late in May 20th to June 4th, an approximately 2-week period, Evergreen Soaring is going to have their annual encampment out at AFREDA, and it sounds like the Vancouver Soaring Association is going to come down for part or all of that as well. So we should have some really good times there. And as a reminder to everybody, if a club is having an encampment there, obviously if the club is using its own towplane, you need to be a part of that club for that towplane. But for pretty much all these events, there should be at least one SGC towplane operating, and SGC towplanes are always usable by SGC members. So if any of you want to party on during these dates where we know we're going to have tows available throughout a week period or couple week period, that is always highly encouraged. As a courtesy, it'd be good to reach out or coordinate with the club that's having the encampment or talk to one of us on the SGC board, and we'll help coordinate and facilitate that. But if any of you are like, man, I wish I could go out there for this week and just have 4 or 5 days of tows in a row, These encampments are an opportunity for that, even if you're not necessarily a member of these other clubs. So,
Hey, Noel.
yeah.
This is Tony Puglisi. As you know, we're gonna Evergreen's going to be the encampment is was it the 30th through the 4th? Are you saying that Vancouver Soaring Club is going to be there the week ahead of time, week before Memorial Day weekend?
Negative. Thank you for the correction. I was misinformed with a typo in notes, and I see now that it was supposed to be May 30th, and somebody wrote May 20th. So my apologies on that.
Okay, well okay, so as far as Evergreen's concerned, Dust Up and the encampment is one big show, and I know that there's differences in those periods of time for towing. So what you're saying then is that Vancouver and Evergreen are going to completely overlap.
That is my understanding. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And let me go ahead and reshare my screen here. And we should both now have the date corrected on that, as well as a small wording change that Mike Bamberg might appreciate. Yes, go ahead, Mike.
One of the things we might also want to put on the SGC website is links to the other clubs, and particularly a roster or at least a list of officers. Because for me, I mean, many of you up there all know each other, but I'm down in the hinterlands of Oregon, and I don't always know who I need to contact to coordinate with another club.
Hey, Noel and Mike.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Jim. If you can bring up the homepage of the SGC website, you'll see I've made some mods to that recently. It's got a list of all of the or most of the clubs things that I know of. Yeah, there you go. So if there's any more club links that need to go in there, let me know. There's also a link, if you scroll on down, there's a link to the SGC News, the quick links. And there's a link to the YouTube stuff.
You are on top of it. Thank you very much, Jim. That's awesome to see here. So for everybody, just to reiterate, all you have to do is go to seattleglidercouncil.org, and then the club contacts are on the right, and the contacts for the links to the Google group and the YouTube are down here at the bottom. Just right on the homepage, easy to see, easy to access. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. I'm just obviously blind.
If you need somebody to fly your motor glider for you, Mike, because of that vision issue, you just let me know anytime. All right. So let me rephrase here, or back up a step. So we've got the training center opening the 15th, 16th. We've got the annual Dust Up happening on Memorial Day weekend, May 27th to 29th. And then starting the day after the Dust Up, for that week, we have Evergreen Soaring and Vancouver Soaring with their encampments at Ephrata. Mike, do you want to say anything really briefly about the Dust Up?
Sure. I need to put it on the calendar so it appears, and also I need to open up registration on the site so that those individuals that want to make sure they're receiving all the emails. So that's something that'll happen hopefully in the next day or so. And then you can go in and register and make sure that your membership is up to date. Because of the way the new fees are, we won't be, if you register as a member, that's all you have to do. That plus register for the event so that I know that you're coming. So get your membership, register for the event, that takes care of everything.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike.
Hang on, Mike, can you explain what it is? I've been a member here 3 years or whatever, and I never go because I don't know what it is. What do we do?
Well, the Dust Up kind of offers us two different possibilities, actually three, if we get enough people interested. First one is it's an opportunity to get together and start flying again together, which is, you know, the Freight is a wonderful place to go fly and socialize. So that's first and foremost in my mind. The second part, and we're working pretty hard at trying to pick up enough dual aircraft that we can offer a more comprehensive opportunity to go cross country for those individuals that have not done it but would like to start doing it or learning how it's done. One of the criteria that we haven't necessarily applied quite as vigorously in the past, but I probably will this year, is I would like you to already be a private pilot. I'd rather not start teaching cross country to student pilots right now. We have enough certificated pilots who have expressed an interest in cross country but haven't had an opportunity that I want to make sure they get that opportunity first. I know that several of the clubs have ships that they're planning on bringing. And again, that was one of the reasons I was looking for that list of clubs so that I could find out who was planning on bringing a two-place ship that would be a 30-to-1 or thereabouts or better. And that way we could work on getting them scheduled with mentor pilots that are appropriate to do this kind of mentoring. So that's the second purpose. The last one is not something I'm necessarily going to emphasize, but if someone would like to practice tasks or records, I would like to be able to discuss either one of those, maybe both of them, but that might be stretching things a little bit. But setting up tasks that people can go try that are more like a contest task rather than a cross-country task, something like that. So those are the three things that I'd like to hopefully be able to provide to individuals. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
They just, actually, Mike, you said something that, just kind of sparked my interest. This is Tony Puglisi. Evergreen's going to be there with at least at this point anyway, the G103, but that is restricted to Evergreen members and Evergreen instructors, of course. Do you have a specific aircraft that you are going to be exposing people to cross country flying it?
Well, so the idea. So here's the thing. I don't know what your plan is for your two-place, the 103 or something of that performance. And I'm not saying that anyone but your club members should be PIC in the aircraft. But if you have the availability to be having someone other than one of your club members be in the front or the back seat to see what cross country is all about, and you say, well, I'm going to have a slot at such and such a time, that's what I'd like to be able to schedule if you're willing. Now, we're not talking about them being the pilot in command or necessarily needing to join your club. Willamette Valley is going to have a 103 also. We're hoping to have a Noel Wade duodiscus with all kinds of new special and wonderful things, and ask me how I know. Tomorrow I'm cutting his instrument panels. But the point is that, and then I believe that Hood River is also considering, Brian, you're online, speak up, considering bringing one of their ships that may be able to be shared. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, so we took this up at the board, and they're a little nervous about sending that K-21 up there because they say if it ever lands out and is down for any length of time, that's right now their principal lesson glider and their money makers. So we're getting some pushback, and you never know. I might just spring for a used Grove 103 myself just to get this ball rolling. I don't know. I'm glutton for punishment. I just want to see these kids get flying,
Yeah, that's what I did. I bought a 103 15 years ago just so I could teach cross country. So, all right.
We're chipping away at them anyway.
Yeah. All right. So
And
let's not
there
take,
may also be, sorry to interrupt, Mike, one quick.
Yeah.
There may also be another privately held 2-seat glass ship. There is a member who has graciously donated the use of their very nice 2-seater many years in a row, and
Yeah.
it's quite possible.
Tony,
something
can
there.
you mute yourself, please? Thank you.
Anyway, yeah, if I can tag on to what Mike said, I think we've been doing this long enough now. The dust up's been around for about 12, 13 years. I think we sometimes are not as good about explaining it as we could be. So just to kind of rephrase or try to put it another way, what Mike said, the dust up is our main event every year where we really try to have a focused mentorship event where it's all about people who are new cross country pilots or new pilots in general trying to learn about cross country. This is their opportunity to come out and experience several things. One, the fact that Afreda is such a safe and easy site to learn cross country from. Two, that we will have these 2-seaters available and we try to get mentors signed up to fly back seat in these ships and fly 2 flights a day, all 3 days, and have a relatively new licensed pilot or new to cross country pilot in the front seat and coach them through a brief 1.5 to 2.5 hour long cross country flight so that people who are understandably unsure about how to go cross country or making that leap away from the airport, which is obviously a big mental hurdle and sometimes a technical and skill hurdle as well. We help get them through sort of that wall, if you will, that point of uncomfortability and unknown, and help them get that first positive cross country experience and show them how you can work your way away from the airport and come back. For those folks that may have a little bit more experience or who are very experienced in cross country but new to Afreda, one of the other things we try to do is if there's interest in lead and follow flights, we'll try to get an experienced pilot in a medium performance or high performance ship, and they will fly conservatively so that one or a couple of gliders can follow them. And again, go on a modest length, 2, maybe 3-hour cross-country flight and help them get familiar with how to fly cross-country or how to fly cross-country out of Afreda and what some of the key landmarks and areas are. Again, the whole idea is to give people opportunities to practice this stuff practically around a lot of other experienced pilots with morning weather briefings, with good equipment. If there's enough interest, we sometimes do seminars in the evenings where we'll talk about a topic or we'll have like an open Q&A, and it's like, bring your questions if you're just figuring this cross-country thing out, and we'll try to answer as many as we can in one evening. And it's tended to be something that people really enjoy doing. So hopefully if anybody had any remaining questions about what this dust up thing is, that's hopefully illuminating a bit.
Thank you.
And Mike, if there's anything else I missed, feel free to speak up.
No, not at the moment, but I will say this, the training center has limited sleeping facilities, and they will be given on a first come, first served basis to those people who have volunteered to help everyone else's life be a little easier. So contact me if you would like to be a volunteer. I already have a couple of people. Brian is coming, but he's going to have, I think you're going to have your motorhome again, Brian. But anyway, the point is, people who contact me and would like to help out, we have ground operations. Brian's taking care of that. We have tow pilots that we'd like to give special opportunities to get some food and things like that. Coordinators for just that. We normally have at least one, either a donation dinner or some other kind of potluck. on one of the nights. I'd love to have someone step up and volunteer to do that. So lots of volunteer opportunities, and we'd like very much to recognize those volunteers by allowing them a place to sleep. Any other questions?
So, Mike, it's Brian. Very briefly, for anybody that's interested, I can use ground crew, as Mike mentioned. I'll bring the kids that I can bring. But if anybody else wants to help with ground crew, even those who are pilots, if you want to help launch and then launch at the end of the line, I doubt we'd get too many people for the ground crew, but put the call out now for anybody that wants to help launch.
Yeah, thank you.
And just one last little tag on that. The mentorship components of the Dust Up are focused, as Mike said, on people who are licensed pilots. However, there is nothing wrong with clubs bringing training gliders and having your student pilots do some training flights when we're not in the middle of launching the cross-country fleet. And those people are perfect for helping out with ground crew. They can come, they can run some wings, help make sure we have a safe launch of the cross-country flights. And then while everyone's up for a couple hours, well, heck, that's a couple open hours that they can be doing pattern tows and some training flights and a little practice thermaling close to the airport. For those that are not licensed pilots, there are still opportunities if your club is coming, if you've got access to a club training ship, to come and participate in that way. And we'd love to see you out there.
This is for both Mike Bamberg and Noel. I sent, this is Tony again. I sent a copy of our the preamble to the schedule that we're going to be posting on our website, because there's a lot of SGC references in there. I would really appreciate if you guys would look through that as soon as you can and get any comments back to me, because there's a lot of stuff about old COVID stuff and, you know, how, using the bunkhouse, which you now said is open. But like I said, there could be some things that are very obsolete that may need deleted or updating. So as soon as you can get that back to me, I really appreciate it. I said it to the SGC board.
Okay, it's on the board. Okay, that's where I'll look for it. Thank you.
Yep.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tony. We'll do.
Hey, Mike, this is James Cooper. I just got a comment about the priority for the Dust Up mentor flight. Well, you know, I agree in terms of giving that kind of mentoring opportunity to the licensed pilots that are really keen on getting into cross country. If we do have open slots, I'd like to have that available to, you know, to student pilots. We don't get a lot of them, but some of the more ambitious ones do come out. I myself included, years back, you know, had my first mentoring flight just after I soloed and flew with Noel, in fact. And that really sealed the deal for me in terms of wanting to do cross-country flying. It's like, you know, oh, this is what it's all about. So if we have open slots, it'll be great to be able to get some of those ambitious students in there too.
Yeah. Hey, James, I'm looking for a coordinator for the dual flights. Are you volunteering?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you, James.
Oh man, you snaked him before I got to some of the other open volunteer positions. Now I won't be able to twist his arm into those. Thanks, James. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, good stuff. I am going to go ahead and pick up the pace here so that we can get to our main topics of the night. Just going to zip through this calendar really quick and let you all read it, hit a couple quick highlights. We will be talking about it, I'm sure, in the next couple of general meetings, but Brad Pattison is organizing Methow Soaring Safari, much like last year's. It's going to be an awesome week up in the North Cascades. It's advanced technical flying up there, but it's a beautiful site. It's a lot of fun. It's a really cool environment. If any of you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to Brad Pattison. You can find his contact information through the SGC membership tools on our website. if you're an SGC member. If you're not an SGC member, feel free to reach out to the SGC board and we can put you in touch with Brad. And Brad, given the time tonight, I'm sorry I'm not going to open this up for a big discussion of the Soaring Safari, but certainly in coming months we'll have Brad get on one of these meetings and give you guys a rundown on the safari and give you a little bit more information. But it's a very cool, very interesting event and a very unique site with some great stuff. Then just as he's recovered from helping organize the dust up, Mike Bamberg is going to be managing the Region 8 contest. It looks like I'll be helping with that and possibly contest directing. Again, that's our annual traditional regional contest. It's a relaxed and fun event based out of Ephrata. We get pilots from all over the Western U.S. and have a great time and some interesting contest tasking. July on the schedule is pretty open, so for any of you that are part of another club or another group and you're thinking, oh man, it would be great if we got a break from our local airport, or maybe, hey, our club can't come out for the dust up, but we'd like to get some time up at Ephrata to check it out and fly there. Please reach out to the SGC board. We can help to make that happen, and July is pretty wide open if your club's interested at all. Obviously, throughout the year, we're going to try to have operations every weekend, but we are pretty much open right now. Then in late August or early September, we have a unique event that's just coming together. There are two-place aerobatic gliders called the MDM Fox, and Arizona Soaring down in Estrella near Phoenix is the home to a couple of our national and world, I think, champion glider aerobatics pilots. And they are going to be looking to escape the Arizona heat after they come back from their major international competitions in August. And Chris Clicks has reached out to them, and I'm assisting him in some small ways at maybe setting up a week to week and a half encampment where they will bring one of their aerobatic gliders up to Ephrata, and we will have the opportunity for people to sign up to take a short series of spin and upset and unusual attitude flights with them. And if anyone's ambitious and wants to get into glider aerobatics, they'll have an expanded program available for folks to get a really in-depth aerobatic experience and start to learn how to do competition glider aerobatic figures in the sky and to get through some of the basic and intermediate maneuvers. So really cool opportunity. Stay tuned. Once we start to firm up dates and pricing, we will start announcing this more and try to get signups. We'll need to get a minimum number of pilots interested in this in order to make sure it happens, but we're really hoping to bring it together. Yes, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, are they CFIGs, and can they offer the spin training required for instructor sign-offs?
They are CFIGs. I am not sure about the second half of your question, but we can certainly double check. I would be surprised if they are not, but I will double check. I can't promise that second part.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah, no
I might add something. Shad, who is the current national champion, is the operations director there at Arizona Soaring. He's going to be bringing up the Fox, and I've been in contact with Jerry Reedinger, who is from Arlington, and he owns a Fox, but he keeps it down at Arizona Soaring, and he organizes the power airbag contest there in Ephrata, and they're going to have an airbag contest on the weekend after Labor Day. And so he just this week talked with Shad down there at Arizona Soaring, and it looks like a tentative date is right after our Labor Day flying in Ephrata that we then would have him up there with the Fox, and we'd be able to fly the Fox that week between that, and then finish off with the aerobatic contest at the kind of a co-event with the IAC at the end of that week. Their contest is on Friday and Saturday, and they're going to help set up the waiver and the box for us, and make sure insurance is available and things like that. So it's really come together. It'll be pretty exciting, and we might even have 2 foxes up there if Jerry brings his up. So anyway, that's what's happening. Jerry said that there's probably 3 or 4 powered airbag pilots that are interested in flying the Fox also. So could be pretty cool.
Definitely. Matt, do you
Yeah,
have another question?
if Shad comes up, he was my instructor down at Arizona Soaring when I got my license, so I know he's an instructor. Well, if he's kept it current, so if he comes up, I know he can do it.
Yeah, cool stuff. Thanks, Madeline. Matt, did you have another question? Your hand looks like it's still up.
Yeah. Is that aerobatic school at Afreda still in operation? The powered airplane aerobatics?
You're talking about the airbag box?
Yeah, that group that uses that aerobatic box, do they still operate at Afreda?
Yeah, that's Jerry Reedinger. He's the one who organizes that at Afreda and coordinates it with Mike Wren.
Oh, okay.
And-
No, well, because I
yeah.
was just gonna see if we get some synergy with them. Like maybe some of those powered aerobatic guys would like to go for a glider ride, and or vice versa.
Absolutely. I think there's several powered airbag guys that are interested in the gliders. In fact, Jerry was saying a lot of them are looking at possibly losing their medical eventually, and they want to be able to keep flying. So that's a great idea.
Yeah, just to clarify, it's an IAC chapter. It's not a commercial operation, but like Chris said, these are some interesting inroads that we're building, and this has all just come about over the last week and a half, thanks to some conversations that Chris started at the SSA convention. So exciting stuff, and stay tuned.
Yeah, let me just throw one thing in. Noel and I were both down the SSA convention, and prior to the convention, the board approved us printing some brochures that my wife was instrumental in making sure we had. And we still have a few of those left, and I'd like to share them out. So let's not talk about it right now. Just send me an email via the Seattle Soaring, SeattleGliderCouncil.org. I'm Mike B, and I think of about 40 or 50 of them left, but we'd like very much to get them in the hands of people that can share them out.
Cool, thanks, Mike. All right, finally, we'll be closing the training center first weekend in October. Shortly thereafter, we'll do elections and then the annual banquet. So that's an extended, thanks for your patience, everybody, look at the 2023 calendar and how it's shaping up. A lot of cool stuff going on this year, but still some opportunities to fill in more for other clubs and encampments and things. Now, the sneak attack part of the evening, not on the outline, volunteerism. We have, as you can see on the bottom half of this page, quite a lot of people, most of whom are already on the board, serving in various volunteer positions. But we have several key positions that are as yet unfilled, and we need the help in order to make all of this possible. You can see from the top half of this page what those open positions are. One of the most immediate sets of openings are we need help with tow card data entry. Our longtime member of SGC and longtime member of the board and all around amazing lifelong volunteer, Jim Simmons, has stepped down from performing that function for us. So we'll need to find somebody to help us with that. And then we also need a calendar and ops czar to help make sure that we've got tow pilots lined up on weekends. We've got some good inroads going with adding some tow pilots to the roster and making that rotation easier, but somebody needs to help coordinate the actual filling of dates and to getting that going, as well as some of these other positions you can see. Airspace coordinator is one that typically involves meeting with once a year or once every other year, meeting with Joint Base Lewis McChord and one or two other military or FAA contacts to make sure that everyone's aware of what we're doing out there at Ephrata and other glider operations areas in Washington State, so we all stay safe. Banquet organization, um, awards committee. These are all things that you guys can help out with that don't require you to stand on the tarmac in the 100-degree sun in the middle of summer, but are critical to us getting things done. So if you can at all help out, again, we are not a commercial operation. This is not an organization where you should feel comfortable just showing up, paying for your tows, and leaving. We need everyone's help to keep this thing going. And anybody who can help out, one night a month, any of these open positions can tow line editor is maybe a little bit bigger of a job. Anyone who wants to do publishing or put up web pages with information monthly, tow line would be great for you. Everything else basically on this list is a very low key, like I said, one night a month kind of a gig, and we could really use your help. So if any of these positions speak to you or are something you could help out with, please reach out to myself or any of the SGC board so that we can make sure we have smooth and well-coordinated operations this year. Anyone want to volunteer while I've got this page up? All right, I'll come knocking door to door another night. So for those of you that hung in, thanks so much. Now let's get into our two main topics for the night. First up, we've got a Towplane status update courtesy of Chris Clicks. Just as a quick way to set the table, for those of you that were involved last year, you may know that we did not end up flying the Cessna 182 last year. There were questions about its engine being a little bit over TBO. And there were also some issues with the Pawnee, or at least some questions about the Pawnee that we spent a lot of time and effort to resolve. And as we headed into the fall, that left us with a little bit of final verification work, I think is maybe the best way to put it, in terms of the Pawnee situation, and then the Cessna 182 really understanding where we're at with that and what we're going to be doing in terms of tow operations moving forward into this year. And before he even starts talking, I want to highlight and thank Chris Clicks immensely for stepping up and being willing to take a lot of time to dig into this topic, to understand this topic, and to start setting us on a good path for our tow planes and our operations over the coming years. So, Chris, without further ado, if you'd like to give yourself a quick introduction and then take us through the tow plane statuses, go for it.
Thanks, Noel. I think everybody knows me already. First of all, I want to say Ron Bellamy is the tow pilot manager, and unfortunately, he's not available. He's actually on a cruise down to Florida somewhere, enjoying himself. But he's going to be coordinating to with the tow pilots and getting tow pilots checked out and that type of thing. So I'm hoping we can get a good lineup of people, but I'll give you confidence that the tow planes will be ready to go. So I spoke with Scott Glassburn, who's a mechanic at Ephrata Aircraft Services, and has been doing our maintenance. He has completed the annuals on both tow planes, and He's done run-ups on both of them, and he says they're ready to go. He on the 182, he did actually remove the carpeting in the rear seat again for us. He didn't need to do that, but I think he did that without any additional cost to us, which was nice of him. And I think I mentioned last time there was a issue with the spinner back plate because we had the propeller sent out to propeller shop for some basically an overhaul. They put new blades on because the old blades did not meet the dimensions anymore. So we've got brand new. Well, I wouldn't say brand new. They're serviceable blades that are like new. And anyway, he was able to take care of the spinner back plate and reposition it without pulling the prop, which is excellent. And he did a run up and said it's ready to go. On the Pawnee, there was a little bit more maintenance than he expected. He had to pull the wing struts. There was an AD, inspection AD that reoccurs. You have to do every year or every so often. I can't remember exactly if this was every year or there's a time frame there, but the annual cost on that was about $4,000, just over $4,000. So as far as I know, they're ready to go. I'm gonna go over there again later this month. I'm gonna try to coordinate that with Ron Bellamy, and so that he can check me out in both airplanes, and I can fly them and make sure that there's no other issues. The one item that I thought might be an issue, I remember, I think during the dust up last year, at some point, someone tried to start the Pawnee and the starter just didn't turn the prop. And I went over and turned the prop a little bit to reposition it on the ring gear. And then it started fine. And I looked at the starter ring gear, and there are a few places where the teeth are a little damaged. And I brought that to Scott's attention. He thinks it's fine. He said there wasn't any issue when he ran the airplane up. And he did sign off the annual with those teeth the way they were. What I'm going to do is reevaluate and try to get an estimate from another shop because Scott's doesn't have time to work on it. He's retiring, and I'm going to start sourcing other shops to do our maintenance. And there is someone else on the field there. I'm going to check them out when I go over there. But I'll get an estimate on replacing the starter ring gear from another shop and just see what we're dealing with. But it probably isn't much of an inconvenience. If it doesn't turn over, you just need to have somebody reposition the prop a little bit and then it'll start up. It's not a safety issue while you're flying. And that's about it. I think also in our last board meeting, there's a couple things. The insurance goes on the Towplanes on March 13th, and we did up the insured value on both airplanes. The Pawnee is now $80,000, which is the maximum amount that Costello will insure it for, and $60,000 insured value for the Cessna 182, and that's up from $45,000. And if you got any questions, let me know.
Chris, I know you gave a detailed rundown to the board, but I can't remember if in a previous general meeting you mentioned the bore scoping. Would you mind briefly explaining to everybody the inspection you did on the engine with the bore scope and such?
Yeah, I think I did mention that in the last meeting, but the Yeah, Noel, thank you for lending this borescope to me. Last time I went over, I did borescope every cylinder on both engines, and just wanted to make sure they were all in good condition and there wasn't anything that stood out that might be an issue for us. And in particular, I was looking for burnt valves, which would be common with a towplane. And I didn't see any sign of any burnt valves. So that was good news.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, and thank you so much for all your work on that. It's great to have confidence in our aircraft as we start the season up and hopefully start to get a whole bunch of flying out of them.
Yeah, just one more thing maybe I just thought of. You did mention that the 182 is over TBO. That's not uncommon for an operator like us to run the engine over TBO. I've looked into this fairly closely. The most engine failures actually happen right after the engine is brand new or overhauled, or there was some major work done to it. And once the engine has been operating for a long time, you look at the numbers, the data that the accident history and failure history. The failures actually go down and are a lot less common the more time that is on it. And so TBO isn't necessarily, or reaching TBO isn't necessarily bad or going beyond it, but what I would like to do is get through this season, and I'm already looking at overhaul costs. I've been thinking about the P-Ponk conversion, which would up the horsepower and make a really awesome towplane out of it, and what the cost might be and how we might be able to fund that. So I am looking into all that, and that's the plan, is to do that as soon as possible on that airplane.
Awesome. Thanks again, Chris. Does anybody have any questions for Chris or questions about the towplanes before we move on? All righty. Let's go ahead and move on to our main presentation of the night. Mr. Mike Bamberg, you let me know whenever you are ready, and we will hunt the wild thermal with you.
All right. Well, I'll just have to click on share and go.
That's affirm.
All right. Come on. All right. Can everyone see that? Okay. If you don't say something, I won't know, because I can't see most of the meeting data now.
Looks good, Mike.
Okay, great. Thank you. So one of the things that in the years I've been teaching cross country, people sometimes have the idea that a thermal is a random thing. And what I want to try to share with you tonight is information that explains the scientific nature of what the atmosphere is doing, and we call it thermals. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to look at things that you can use to better determine where lift is most likely to be.
We lost your audio, Mike.
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Chris. So we're going to talk about some atmospheric basics. We're going to talk about something called convective cells, thermal reservoirs, and two different ways in which we actually get a thermal started. And we're going to try to put it all together and explain how we detect where a thermal is most likely to be. One of the things that several people talk about is we're gonna go out and fly, but when we fly, we want to fly towards the place that we think is most likely to give us some lift. So, come on, there we go. So insolation is a phrase that pertains to how much sun is reaching the surface of the Earth. And as most of us probably already understand, sunshine and the sun in particular is the primary source of incoming energy in terms of visible light, as well as what gets converted to IR, infrared. And we also understand that we get more at different times of the year and different latitudes. One thing that we oftentimes overlook, though, is the last one on this list, which is the slope of a surface. When we go and look at people who are flying, we oftentimes find that they are flying near the upper edge of a inclined surface, like a ridge or a mountain or something like that. And we sometimes don't appreciate how much a very gentle increase in the slope of a surface can truly increase the energy that is being released for our use in terms of thermals. So we'll go there. Everybody, I hope, in their training has learned about SGC charts, which are nothing more than a diagram that describes whether the atmosphere is in a stable form or in an unstable form. And it has to do primarily with what happens to a change in temperature in the atmosphere. Most of us know that as you go up, things get colder, but the rate at which they get colder or warmer in some cases determines whether the atmosphere is stable or unstable. And this is not an opportunity that I'm trying to teach you about SGC charts, but I do recommend that you take some time to learn about them, just so you can understand what someone says when they say it's, the -3 index is 11,000 feet, and what does that mean? So that's a good thing to go study outside of this. The last one is heat transfer, because a thermal is nothing more than a convective action, and convection by its nature is heat related. And so where does the heat come from? As most of us know, when we are standing up and the temperature of the air is a certain temperature, if we go down to within a few inches of the ground, it gets remarkably warmer. And part of that is because the ground is re-radiating the energy from the sun converted to infrared, and that heats the air by direct contact. The air itself doesn't absorb much energy from the light that's coming through it. And so that doesn't, just knowing that there's sunshine doesn't necessarily help us out. We need to know where the most active conversion of that sunlight into infrared, and therefore heating of the air surface, is going to help us to determine the likelihood of a thermal. All right, gonna try to show you some pictures. This is what we call an eye chart because it tests your eyes. But the key points here are there is a type of convection of which our thermals are one, called a Rayleigh-Bénard convection, and it's a natural convection. And these cells have some very interesting phenomenon, and they've been studied extensively. So we understand what this is all about. But I want you to go down to the last line on the page. Spontaneously organizes into a regular pattern of cells. That is to say that we should expect, if we have one thermal, we're going to have more than one thermal. And knowing the relationship between the surfaces that we're flying over and the fact that the thermals in general organize into a definable pattern. And that's what we're going to look at. And that's why this is, in my mind, so critical to understanding how to go find thermals. Any questions there before I move on? Going once? Okay. Now, if this doesn't show, you let me know, and I'll try to get a still picture, but we're going to try this. Now, can everybody see that?
Yeah,
Somebody
frame rate
tell
was
me.
a little low, but it was showing.
Okay, so I've stopped it on a portion of the video that is a little more that you can see this. I want you to look at the shape. And what we see is each one of those round circles is an upwelling, what we would call a thermal. And it interacts with the other thermals near it on in relationship to a number of very well understood principles having to do with how much heat's coming from underneath it and how high each thermal can go. And we're going to look at that relationship right now. Whoops, wrong one. We're going to back up. So these convective cells are happening, and they're the interthermal distance. You're going to probably say, well, wait a minute, I've gone much further than that. But the interthermal distance is approximately 1.5 to 2.5 times the thermal height. And we'll talk about a little bit about why that happens. And by the way, that number comes from studies that were done in the late 60s, early 70s, when they were trying to understand atmospheric mixing from smog studies in the LA basin. And in that, they determined that the height of the what's called the inversion layer, how high a thermal can go, is directly proportional to the distance between thermals. And again, this is a known item. Now I'm going to go back, I hope. See if I can go back. Yeah. So in a perfectly homogeneous heating from the bottom with a relatively homogeneous surface, the pattern is the most efficient packing pattern that nature's come up with, which is the same as a honeycomb. And if you look at it, I've got two lines here. The one line is along the boundary where most of the air, if we consider that the center of each of these hexagons is the center of the convective cell where the most powerful upward convective activity is going, and then it spreads out and it descends along these the lines we see, or the boundaries between them. You can see that if you went along that orange path, that you're going to be mostly in down air. But if you went along that green path, you'd be mostly in up air. Now, I want to step back to something I said earlier, and that is convective cells spontaneously organize. In other words, this is a pattern that you shouldn't be surprised to see. Now, the yellow line, if you find yourself going down a line and say, gosh, all I'm in is sink, and you turn 30 to 60 degrees in one direction or the other, you will be able to get to the other portion of the cell, the other line. And again, going back to the thing we talked about, the center of these cells is roughly 1.5 to 2.5 times the height of the thermal. So let's think about what that means. If the thermals are going up to 10,000 feet, then the center of those points should be roughly 15,000 to 25,000 feet apart, or roughly 3 to 5 miles apart if it's up at 10,000 feet. And again, you might say, oh my gosh, I've never seen that happen. Well, I'm going to show you some pictures. But the other point is, this is in the perfect condition, and we have all sorts of modulators, and I'm going to introduce those modulators, and you should be able to understand how to take advantage of them. But I have seen this exact kind of pattern up at Freda. I have been running a line going, crap, I'm in all kinds of sink. What am I going to do? And I go, oh yeah, turn right or left 30 degrees and wait a few moments. And by golly, that's right, it works. So, I've proven this to myself. You're going to have to prove it to yourself, but I know that it works. So it's homogeneous surface heating is what we're looking at. It's hexagonal distribution, and it has roughly a consistent strength and structure. Now, what kind of modifiers? Well, you guys probably know about convergence lines or streeting. That has to do with wind. It has to do with different surfaces. We don't have a homogeneous surface, and we don't have a homogeneous heating. But that doesn't necessarily move it too far off of this very regularly patterned lift situation. And one of the things that Noah and I have discussed a couple times, and I hope that you're taking advantage of, or let me back up one. If you want to become a better cross-country pilot, rather than taking a whole bunch of tows, which isn't a bad idea, take the cost of one of those tows and get a subscription to CU, where you can go and look at how other people are flying. Now, I had a mini Nimbus. Best L over D is supposed to be 42-1. I'd be surprised if it's more than 38-1. But there were a number of flights where the average L over D for the flight was in excess of 50-1. And it wasn't because of anything other than using this principle of finding the lift line and staying in it. And it doesn't take a very high performance glider to get those kinds of numbers if you know how to use this energy that the sun and the earth are giving us. So I want you to look at that picture. Everybody see that picture? Would you say that's a regular pattern? And in this particular case, the near clouds are in a relatively flat area, and the far clouds that have the higher tops are in areas that have ridges where there's more energy coming up. But the regularity of this pattern, now in this particular case, we have streeting aligned by the wind. But nevertheless, would you say there's plenty of lift there? Probably. Okay, so now let's talk about the modifiers. There's this term, and I'm not the first person to use it, but I find it a useful term to think about, and that is this idea of thermal reservoirs. Now, the reservoirs we use to store water are places where we pool water or we collect water. In this case, we're going to collect heat. And we're going to collect heat because either the type of surface is different, whether it's water, whether it's wet soil, whether it's dry soil, whether it's sand or rocks or trees or crops. All of them store energy. They store energy at a slower rate or a faster rate, depending on which one. Water stores energy for a long period of time and releases it slowly. So it stores it slowly, it releases it slowly. Rocks, on the other hand, store it pretty quickly. They release it pretty quickly. Trees store it very slowly. They release it very slowly. If you go and look at Reichman's cross-country book, he talks about the fact that forests are sometimes the best thermal sources late in the afternoon because now they've warmed up, the other areas have cooled down, and they start releasing gentle, not strong, but gentle thermals. Crops, depending on whether it's an irrigated crop, because the first thing that happens when the ground warms up is it evaporates water, and that doesn't make a thermal. So, water itself is not often a good place, but we're going to talk about water as a trigger a little bit later. So, as we look at the ground, one of the questions we want to ask ourselves is the ground to my left, the ground to my right, the ground out in front of me. Where is energy going to be stored more quickly, and where is it going to be released more quickly? And again, most of us have these kinds of experiences from our general life. We know that when we walk over an area that's got a lot of rocks, it's hot. And if we walk over a crop, it's somewhat cooler. So these are just the ideas to put into your mind, is that you want to be thinking about where is the energy going to be originating from the surface of the earth. Okay. Now, those of you who've been over to Ephrata, here is Soap Lake. If you were to look at this from above, without knowing anything about the shape of the terrain, tell me where you think more energy is being stored, and or where more energy can be released. Now, this particular picture is taken just about noontime, slightly after noon. And the reason I know that is the shadow on the face over here and no shadow on the face over here that I know is there. Okay, don't be shy.
Over the city.
Over the city is not a bad place. Why did you say that?
Lots of concrete, lots of metal, lots of dry surfaces.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Can you guys see my mouse if I move it? It's over Soap Lake right now.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, good. So tell me about Soap Lake as a thermal reservoir. Not a very good one.
Water can
Think
absorb
about,
tremendous amounts of heat and barely change its temperature.
That's right. Look over here in the upper right corner. We got this big green circle. When would you expect it to release heat? Assuming it is not deeply watered today. Would you expect it to release any heat? If it's not going to release heat, what can it do for you? All right, we're going to move on here. I want you just to be thinking about those things. We have something called discontinuities and triggers. A discontinuity is where the surface of the earth changes in nature, from soil to a crop, from the existence of a tree line. Triggers such as a change in elevation, not even a very big one, and places where a change in temperature takes place. Now we're going to look back here at the picture. Where are the discontinuities? I'm going to go back up here to this big circle in the upper right. If we had some warm air moving across the surface in a general northeasterly direction, this is a north up picture. When it hits that circle, the air in the circle tends to be warmer or cooler?
Cooler.
Cooler. So the warm air is not going to try to push through the cool air. It's going to rise over the cool air. It has to. It can't do anything else. And so at that point, now we talk about stability and instability in the atmosphere. If we have an unstable atmosphere, by the natures of what an unstable atmosphere provides, once we trigger or push a parcel of air upward, it wants to continue upward by the laws of thermodynamics. And we're not going to change them, and we can't, all we have to do is understand how they work. But the laws of thermodynamics say that an unstable atmosphere does not resist vertical motion. So the question is, what causes the vertical motion? Now, going back to the Bernard-Rayleigh eye chart that we had, it talked about the fact that gravity and buoyancy have something to do with initiating part of the upward motion. So you can generate a bubble big enough over a thermal reservoir, especially when the wind is low, that it gets so light that the cooler air surrounding it wants to rush in and pitch it upward. And once it starts going upward, it brings all the other surrounding air in. Now, that's one of the things that makes all these wonderful dust devils, is the air pulling in from all directions creates the swirl and goes up. But it also is showing you that what the air mass is doing. It's being lifted upward. Now, with a trigger or a discontinuity, if we went from one edge of the lake and had a gentle breeze, gentle is easier to picture. A stronger breeze is more likely to do some damage to the organization of the thermal. But in terms of the triggering of the thermal, is we move that mass of air that has been warmed, let's say by the town, and we push that air towards the lake, it's going to be displaced upward because of the cooler air residing over the top of the lake. And go back to what we talked about earlier. When you're standing up, there's a certain temperature. You get down to with about 2 inches of the ground, the temperature changes remarkably. So all we have to do is get 2 inches of air pushed upward. We're not talking about getting the air to go 10 feet or 30 feet. It just has to go up. One of the things we don't, unless we've taken the time to study it, and most of us don't, and I'm not saying that I'm an expert, thermodynamics is a very interesting series of principles, and it has to do, especially in the atmosphere, with the change in temperature, with even the slightest rise. The drop in pressure, the expanding, the temperature cooling, all of these things, adiabatic lapse rate, that sort of thing, all of those things take very small changes and make something happen. And these ideas of thermal reservoirs collecting the heat and either wind or slope, we're going to look at that in a moment, slope causing that warm mass to move to some discontinuity or some trigger point. And when that happens, we get it going up and the principles of thermodynamics and instability in the atmosphere take over. Okay, here we go. So if you've never flown on a ridge line, thank you very much, Noel. You took me down the ridge at Logan 7 years ago. But I have a little diagram here, and it's an exaggerated because I had this in a different presentation. I just drew it for this one. You look at this rightmost picture, and we have snow or ice or something causing cold air. Where does it go? It flows down the hill because it's heavy. We have warm air that's here on the western side of this first bump that is being heated. And when the two of them, this cold air would like to flow over this direction, but it may actually push the warm air that's in this depression upward, and it draws this up. And right there along that crust, you can have a very strong uplift take place. Sometimes if you go down to a place like Montague or Logan or up in the mountains near Lake Chelan or over in Mittal, the point is these points are both discontinuities because they're a change in slope, and they are trigger points. And that lift, if we had, if this was just a simple hill, the warm air going up the hill would not fall down the other side because it's not heavy enough to do that. It's going to continue and shear right off the top. It may pull other warm air from the side, but it's not going to fall over. So we come back and we look at that picture again, and our discontinuities are all of these places where there are a change. So first thing we have to do is identify a thermal reservoir. Second thing we have to identify, and it's an important thing to identify, and it's surprising to me as a pilot that not more of our pilots keep aware of what the wind is doing, because where the wind is pushing a warm mass of air towards a discontinuity and the air is unstable, it will trigger a thermal. not might, it will. And those are the steps. I mean, people say, well, how do you go find a thermal? Well, where's the heat going down? Where's that heat moving to? And what's in the way to stop it or make it bump upwards? Okay. So having said that, then, wind pushes the reserve downwind. The discontinuity displaces the buoyant air upwards. Instability in the atmosphere allows it to continue upwards, and buoyant air is often released off of a high point or peak. Now, if you have read Cross Country Soaring by Reichman, he mentions that one time he saw a rock cairn. You know what that is? Just a little cache of rocks. It was he said it was less than 2 meters high. And he realized that if he flew over it, the greatest potential for him to find uprising air because that little rock cairn was going to trigger an upward, the start of the upward motion. And of course, that's what happened to him, or he wouldn't have told us the story. But the point is that it is a way to try to determine where the likelihood is. I mean, granted, if you're at 10,000 feet, you're not going to see a little rock cairn. At that point, you're not going to be looking at the ground. This is a lot of what we're talking about here is looking at the ground. And Noel and I teach in a similar way. You get in a thermal and you start turning, and you kind of look upwind in the direction, in the upwind direction, and you look down at the ground and say, where's my thermal reservoir, or where is the trigger that got this thermal started? Start learning how to identify those even from altitude, and that will help you identify them when you need them when you're down low. So if you are high and clouds are present, that's usually one of the best ways to find them. It's not, everybody knows about that. That's nothing new, not earth-shaking. Think about your interthermal distance. Now, Brian, you're on the call. We've been flying Condor, and I had a fairly aggressive thermal activity set up in the last race that we had. And the interthermal distance, well, the clouds were 13,000, the base of the clouds were 13 to 16,000 feet. And so you'd go 20 miles sometimes in a straight line before you'd find the next thermal. So that you have to think about, if you don't find something, you need to think about how you're going to extend your glide far enough to find one, because there's going to be one. If you haven't read John Cochran's Just a Little Faster, Please, that's one of his presentations, and also Flying McCready with Uncertain Lift and Limited Altitude, which again is a way of determining when you're going to slow down and when you can go faster. I mean, it's not really part of this presentation, but the fact is, if you understand how far apart thermals are likely to be of a certain strength, and he's done a statistical analysis. So if you want one that's 5 knots, you're going to go further than if you want one that's one knot. So that's something to think about. When you're down low, you're going to identify the thermal reservoir, you're going to identify the discontinuity, and you're going to go downwind of the discontinuity. Now, the one thing I'm missing from this particular list is which way is the wind blowing? Because that's going to tell you where the air from the thermal reservoir is going to be headed as it goes towards a discontinuity. Now, we talked about identifying the thermal reservoir and the different types of material. One of the things to think about, there are different areas on the ground that not only get hot, but stay hot. And you can push an awful lot of air across them, and they will continue to heat that air up. And so it'll send off one thermal, and within a few moments, the air that's moving across it will start getting hot enough to be triggered again. And so you'll get this pulse after pulse after pulse of these thermals coming from this particular thermal reservoir. So that's something to think about. Now, as you become more proficient at flying, and the flying isn't as challenging just to control the aircraft, you start looking around for things like, what is the cycle time? How long does it take for a cloud to reappear in a particular area? And you can do this sitting on the deck at the training center. You can just look out and say, okay, I saw a thermal over there. How long before I see the next one? Because you probably run into it. You say, well, there was a cloud there a little while ago, but when I got there, there was nothing. And part of it has to do with cycling and thinking about that. And this just talks about where to go to be most likely to find a thermal, but it doesn't always occur simply because it's in between the cycles. That's the point. All right, I'm just going to show you a little picture here, and we'll talk a little bit about a few things. So right here, just right of the center, is the Willamette Valley Soaring Club Airport. And this is the major highway going west-northwest out of Portland. And over here, we've got a lumber yard, and it stores a whole lot of energy. And right here, we have a little forest. And this line here is this one that runs roughly west to east is a railroad track. And you notice that the highway goes over it. So what that means is that right here, just northeast of the lumber yard, is a berm, a place where the flat land is built up to create this overpass. Now we fly a left-hand pattern into this runway. So we start over here, we fly on a 45 towards the center, then we turn and parallel the runway, and then we do our base and our final. Guess where the lift is? It's right here, it's right here, and it's right here. So let's understand why. What does this forest represent? Use your new words, folks.
Trigger.
A trigger or a discontinuity, either one. Yeah, in this case, I would call it a discontinuity simply because the density of the air in the forest is cooler. Have you experienced that? You know that? Sure, everyone knows that, or at least most people do. That's why you go in the shade. It's cooler air. Now, we turn and we go down this way, and right about here, there's also a thermal. And that one is due to the fact that we have a very, very large thermal reservoir right here with a discontinuity on its eastern edge. It's almost a guaranteed trigger. Unfortunately, if you get in the traffic pattern, you can't thermal because you don't thermal at pattern height. But if you can come over the top of this, we normally have a wind from the west-northwest coming in. And now we are coming downwind parallel to our runway here, and you hit this point right where the highway and the railroad intersect, and you've got this berm, and you have this wind blowing from the northwest. It hits that berm, has to go up, has to go up. There's your trigger. And those, I'm sure that many of you have not flown at Willamette Valley, but what you would learn is how persistent those elements are. We have over here, oftentimes in this particular picture taken several years ago, these fields all change. Sometimes they're green, sometimes they're fallow, but there's almost always something in this area here that you can get up and go someplace. So my point is, by looking at a picture, in this particular case, I had to explain some things that you wouldn't normally have known, such as the fact that this berm is here. But anytime you see an overpass, there's going to be a berm. This forest, talked about that. The only thing you wouldn't know is that most of the time the wind is coming from the west-northwest. So that's the end of what I had there. What kind of questions do you have? You all went to sleep or left on me. I don't know which it is.
Well, there's still 28 or 29 people online, so either
Oh,
they're asleep or they're too shy to ask questions.
all right. Well, I'm not shy to give answers. So even if you don't want to ask the question now, you're welcome to send me a text or an email and let me know what kind of questions you'd like me to deal with, and I will attempt to help you out there.
Yeah, Mike, I got a question for you. This is Kevin Pinky.
Yeah, hi, Kevin.
Hey, Mike, how are you? Good to see you at the convention.
Yep.
Hey, so you've got some notes on searching, which is, try and identify thermal reservoir, try and identify your discontinuity, and then go downwind of it. Do you have any like other advice for searching, or at what point should you give up your search? I find like challenges that I have are like finding good thermals down low. Ultimately, any thermal that will keep you in the air is a good thermal. But
That's right.
I certainly, when I think I've found something that has probability of generating a thermal, or previous experience from flying in the Ephrata area, sometimes where like good areas are, particularly locally at least. But advice on an effective searching strategy, because if you go downwind and maybe there's there's the surface wind, and then there's the change in the wind as you go up in altitude. And you kind of have to take those two together a little bit in terms of considering it's like, okay, well, surface wise it'd be here, but with at the height I'm at, it's actually drifting this way. Any kind of search pattern advice?
Well, I wasn't the first one to say this, but if you stop the search, you're going to land. My point there is you should be identifying what I call giant steps. You're climbing in a thermal. That's not the only thing you're doing. You're trying to climb, but the next thing is where am I going to go next? If you're on a task or you're on across country, you have a general idea where you want to go. You just don't want to, wander about. Wandering about is good to practice your thermaling, but it's not good to try to get somewhere in cross country. And back in the early 70s, they used to have something called the Soaring Symposia. And all of the bigwigs back then said, if you're not making a significant decision every minute, you're not going to get going very fast or very far. That's a hard thing to grasp and be willing to do, to be making those kinds of decisions that frequent. Can I say I do that? Well, no, but I can probably say I make a pretty good decision every 2.5 to 3 minutes and feel very confident saying that. And part of it is, the idea of get high and stay high is really important, even if there aren't any clouds. Learning, like Noel says, you get in a thermal and you start climbing, you look down in the direction of where you think the wind's coming from and try to identify that thermal reservoir. And this may sound like beating a dead horse. I mean, but it's true. You learn to identify these things that are most likely, highest probability to give you lift, and you always go to the highest. Now, another writer has said, stay in a thermal long enough to get enough altitude to go to the better one. One of the things that we oftentimes will do is we get ourselves in a situation where we're lower than we'd like to be. And we say, gosh, I'd take a 1-knotter now. And so we find one and we start climbing in a 1-knotter. How long should we climb in the 1-knotter? Until we have a pretty good chance of reaching something stronger. And again, this goes back to John Cochran's writing on Just a Little Faster, Please. And that article talks about the statistical distribution of the strength of thermals. And the likelihood of finding a lesser strength thermal, let's say in the first 2 or 3 miles, is fairly high. the likelihood of finding a stronger thermal in the next 10 miles is fairly high, but not in the next 2 or 3. So that's, and as you know, Kevin, you get up to 10,000 feet, you're probably going to cruise a little faster than you do when you're at 4,000 feet AGL, because now you're going to slow down and take whatever you can find until you can get high enough to find something stronger. I mean, that's the principle I follow, and I don't know any other way. I don't stop to search, because when you stop to search, you're probably going to land out. If you let yourself get that low that you're just desperate to find anything, you may be lucky, you may be good at identifying, but the best thing to do is to adjust what you're doing as you descend. And again, that's what most of the most successful cross-country pilots suggest.
Can I jump in on that a little bit, Mike?
You may go, please.
So I will provide a slight refinement, which is, as I will say, I don't advocate stopping and repeatedly going over an area, like trying to hit all 4 corners of a field, let's say, and making a complete circuit of it, or going back and forth across it twice. Because exactly what you said there is true. If you stop to search extensively, you are losing altitude and you're not progressing towards any goal. And even if you're into what we call survival flying, where your goal is no longer to go fast or go far, you should still have a goal. That goal should be, I'm going to make it to the next airport, or I'm going to make it to my safe land out field, right? You should always, in my opinion, have a goal. It's just what that goal is might change throughout the flight based on your situation. And if you stop and only search in one spot, you've really stopped progressing towards your goal. Now, what I will say as the refinement on that is I don't think that that means that you just make a beeline and you fly arrow straight. If you are really desperate to find a thermal, I think you have to strike a balance where you are progressing towards your destination, be it your land out field, the nearest airport, or whatever. And as you do that, you are trying as many places on the way as possible. And that might mean you fly a slightly meandering, or let's call it snake-like path through the sky. So you're still making your way towards your goal, but you're sampling more air. And you're not doing that randomly. You're doing that hopefully in service of pinpointing an area you've identified as a likely thermal reservoir or a likely thermal trigger. So it's not, I'm just going to search this entire area, or I'm going to meander over this entire area. It's more a thought process of like, okay, I've looked at the fields ahead of me on the way to this potential land out airport. This field looks like the driest, darkest, or in some cases, sorry, lightest field. And it's bounded on 2 sides by, maybe it's got a hill here and a different color field here. And so this is likely a place that's either going to have a lot of thermal energy or where a discontinuity is happening. So I'm going to go try to fly over that field on my way to my land out airport. And maybe I'll cut across towards one of the discontinuities and then curve towards the other discontinuity. And then if I strike out, okay, I'm back on course to my land out airport, right? It's that kind of a productive deviation rather than a stop and search kind of thing. Obviously, markers like dust devils and clouds modify all this. We won't get into that. But there's one other thing, and I think Chris has his hands up, that I will say on this topic that Mike mentioned, which is I call it playing a mental game of where did my thermal come from, right? Where you're looking down at the ground, you're looking at maybe a cloud above you, and you're trying to draw an imaginary line down and say, where did this thermal come from? What kicked it off, or what's powering it now that I'm here? It's not important to be right. In fact, oftentimes there's no way to know if you're right or wrong about that. The point of that exercise is to get yourself in the habit of thinking in that mode. Because if you do that enough, it starts to build that habit into you subconsciously or in a way that doesn't take many brain cycles. And as you look across the landscape and fly, your brain will naturally start incorporating some of those factors in. If you've spent a lot of time thinking about, like, oh, was there a rock pile there? Was there a shoreline? Was there a cliff? That will naturally seep into your decision-making process when you're looking at those, as Mike called it, giant steps of like, oh, 10 miles down the road where I'm going to target my next thermal, why should I go in that direction as opposed to 10 degrees off that way or 5 degrees off that way? You will intuitively just automatically start incorporating these things and be like, oh yeah, I should go that way. And you may not even consciously recognize you're picking that direction because your brain has registered a discontinuity or rocks that are a likely thermal reservoir or things along those lines. So some of these exercises, I'm being very explicit here because I find that sometimes we are not careful in explaining this, especially to newer cross-country pilots. Some of the point of these exercises is not to be right, is not to conclusively prove where a thermal came from or why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. It's to build habits and thought patterns that will serve you well down the line as they become more and more automatic and part of your flying. Anyway, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I'm thinking, and tell me if you guys do the same thing, but when there's a heat source and a trigger point, what I tend to try to do is keep in mind which way the wind is blowing and try not to search that area over the trigger point going across the wind, but actually going into the wind or downwind. With the wind is the way I try to search rather than at an angle. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think of it. I said, look downwind, but you can also, if you think you're already downwind of what's likely to be a trigger point, turn upwind. The idea is to move in the direction a parallel to the wind, and think also in terms of that hexagonal pattern or a regular pattern. It may not be perfectly hexagonal, and that is, if you're cruising along and you don't seem to be finding anything, change your heading by 30 or 60 degrees, one side or the other, and go until you encounter it again, because these are naturally occurring, spontaneously organized convective cells.
Yeah, Chris, I'd agree. I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I was gonna say I try and do that is like particularly as I like moving down into the middle of my height band where I'd say I'm more kind of like actively searching for the next thing as opposed to stumbling along into it. But yeah, I look at clues in the sky and clues on the ground and try and orient myself upstream of those features, and then try and fly into them where I increase my probability of running into it. Whether that's flying up, positioning myself upwind of where I think it is, and therefore trying to set myself on a probable intercept path into the area, or same thing going downwind. It's similar thing. It's like I'll adjust my course to increase what I think is the best chance of running into it, so that I'm still maintaining a direction, direction and distance rather than just kind of meandering, hoping to find something. So it's the lower third where like I get desperate.
Yeah, that lower third is what usually gets me into trouble at contests. I hold out for the strong thermal too long and then find myself down low. Just to put a little refinement or my own, I don't know, an additional thought onto what you and Chris are saying. If you can position yourself to fly directly upwind or downwind to a potential thermal or a high likelihood thermal area, that's great. And that might mean that you're flying across the wind. And then when you get to a spot you think is really likely, you just briefly turn, into the wind or dead downwind for, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and if it's there, great. If it's not, okay, resume course. Sometimes you may not be able to do that. And in any case, if you're flying on a contest task or you have a cross-country direction, sometimes that leg is 90 degrees to the wind, right? And you've got to make progress 90 degrees to the wind. So when you're in those cases, I think one of the things to think about is the fact that having to go across the wind changes your probability of being able to easily find a thermal versus going more upwind or downwind. And you just need to know that and adjust your level of aggressiveness and adjust what strength thermal you're willing to accept as you proceed across the wind, right? So it's not just I force my glider to fly upwind or downwind to catch the thermal. It's also adjusting your level of aggressiveness and risk taking so that you don't, put all your chips in one pot, for example, and like, well, I'm flying across the wind and there's likely thermal here and I'm going to fly aggressively to it. Knowing that it's a lower probability of hitting a thermal when you're flying directly across the wind means you should be a little bit more conservative and have a really good plan B, plan C, and maybe plan D. Hopefully that made a little sense.
Yep. Well, thankful to all of you that have chipped additional points in. It's always good to get a different explanation only because we all learn differently. So appreciate very much comments. Any other questions or something? Yes, go ahead, Malon.
Yeah, so I have Condor too, and it seems to me that the thermals are kind of sporadic. Is there any relationship to what we've talked to tonight in that particular experience? Does anybody know? I mean, what I'm doing is I'm turning the clouds off, so it's a blue day, you know what I mean? And I'm trying to understand, because I'm in a 126, I can go about 3 per 1, and so I got to be careful when I set out to go somewhere. So I'm trying to understand what you're talking about expressly. I'm actually have up a Google map of afraid of what we've been talking here. Any relationship between Condor and what we've been talking about that you guys know?
So I can help you out there. And I think you sent me an email and you got on the list for the flying that we do with Willamette Valley, didn't you, Malon? Hello?
No, wasn't me, so I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. So usually in the wintertime, I run an event every couple of weeks, and sometimes more often. But back to your point, it depends on how well the landscape creator actually studied the landscape and didn't just put a random distribution of thermal percentages. When you're building those landscapes, it's possible to increase the probability of thermals in various locations. The only landscape of which I'm aware, which includes, for example, Ephrata and Arlington and most of the Pacific Northwest, is called the Cascade Range. And it's a huge landscape. And I doubt very much if the people who put it together have any personal experience in our area. On the other hand, there is a group of individuals Brett Hess organizes, and they will create a limited landscape for your club. And I can certainly put that information out on the SGC news forum that Noel was mentioning, and you can, I mean, he's willing to do it for free. Just give him the waypoint file and give him the XY coordinates and of the rectangle that you want, and he will create one for you. And then you have one that you can go in. The process is not difficult. It's just that most people don't want to spend the time doing that correlation. One of the things that I do, and this is way off topic, and I apologize to everybody else, but if you want to understand about making Condor more or less realistic, please give me a call. I'll be happy to talk to you. There's a lot of things that you can do. And quite frankly, Malin, I would not recommend that you try to do cloudless in the 126 until you really understand the weather models, and throw some clouds in there and pick low cloud bases for you, because that means the inner thermal distance will be shorter.
Yeah. Okay. I've done that. I got like 120 hours flying it now in the last year. And I'm just trying to, cause you know how you get the blue day in Ephrata, you know, and so
Yeah.
then, you know, you go to the big house, you go out towards the sheep ranch or the pig farm, whatever we call it. You know what I mean? I hit a few places out there and I've been pretty lucky in those places. And I really, like I said, I really learned a lot tonight and I appreciate that. But I was just trying to maybe get a little bit sharper in Condor, you know, to be able to find those things. But it seems a little irregular to me. But I'm still going to keep trying. I appreciate it, though. I will turn the clouds on, and I do keep them quite low. And I do go 3 to 1. I mean, that just seems to be where one, and that's not 1/2. That's almost 100% of my gliding distance. I think if everything's just right, it's 4 miles per thousand. But anyhow, like I said, I'm just trying to get sharper so I can, and I built a couple triangles out on the top of a freight out there too, 5 mile between the points, you know, big house, sheep farm, there's a road crossing out there, Highway 9 and whatever road, you know, and I've done that one fairly successfully and I find thermals here and there, but I need to eventually branch out. And that's why I was asking again about what dust up is so I can try to join some of these things so I can get better at this craft, trying to do this thing. So anyway, yeah, but I may give you go ahead.
Well, I'm just, you know, we're kind of far afield. Give me a call and we'll talk some more.
Yeah, that's just what I was going to say. Okay. Yep. Sounds great.
And just a tip for you, Malin, and anybody else who's flying a low to medium performance ship out there. The tasks that are called the Proving Grounds tasks, which are detailed on our YouTube channel, and I'm going to be hopefully working with Jim McNeil to post on our website a little bit more about here this spring. Are perfect tasks for something like that because there's 3 different tasks. They start very small and keep you within 5 or 10 miles of the airfield. And then as you progress in the tasks, they go further and further out onto the plateau and give you more practice at distance and would probably be really good for that. Go ahead, Mike. And what a lot of people don't know is that, for example, is the email address SGC at soaringtask.com. Is that where you send your scores? Do you remember that? It's on the worksheets. I'd have to look it up. Sorry.
Yeah. The point is, if you do a flight in Condor, you can, if you do one of those tasks in Condor, you can send it to the same address and it will give you a Condor score. And it's not part of the regular one, but Noel will get a letter. I just got one. I'm the coordinator for the Willamette Valley on Proving Grounds. I just got a email notification that a guy in the club had done the highest one, and I didn't even know he was trying any of them. But he did it on wings. He did it on Condor, and yeah. So you can use that as a measurement of improving yourself against a known task, even in Condor.
Cool. All right, if folks have more Condor questions, Mike is an amazing resource on that. If you have more questions about the Proving Grounds or tasks out of Ephrata, feel free to ask myself or anyone else who's flown there for a while. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring up the final slide for the night, I think, which is to show you that our next general membership meeting is April 3rd, 7 p.m. as always. The link you got tonight should continue to work for future months. I will, of course, send one out to everybody again and post it on the SGC News site shortly before that date. Hope to see all of you there. Feel free to pass along the word. These meetings are open for all pilots in the Northwest, so others are more than welcome to join in and be part of this. We'll have more details coming up about the opening of the season and operations then, as well as the trailer lottery, as was mentioned. So if you can, if you're anticipating tying your glider down at Ephrata this season and or putting an RV on the property this season, go ahead and go on our website and go ahead and pay for those fees so that you'll be on the list for the lottery next month.